everyone. We're going to try and start on time. I think this is probably one of the best turnouts we've had for Off the Lips. So we're super excited today. Danie's going to be launching his pyramid scheme. His Bitcoin pyramid. No, I'm only joking. Danie's got a bunch of Danie is the person that when you bump into him at the green room, he's always got something completely unexpected about community and collective, community and the collective to talk about. So I'm really curious what Danie has been up to and what he's about to launch today. And you had me at Secret Club. Over to you, Danie. As usual, Danie's going to talk and then we'll do a Q&A at the end.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name's Danie. It's not a pyramid scheme. Yeah, exactly right. We're going to talk about creative, redemptive alternatives for systems today. And if that doesn't sound as interesting as the poster, I want to apologize up front. I'll try and make it quick at least if it's not interesting. So we're going to talk a bit about systems that we have. I'm going to zoom in on examples. You have to give me some rope because it's a short time and there's nuance and complexity to it that I'm absolutely not going to cover. And then we'll talk about what we want in systems and what some of those systems may look like. Okay. These are my two boys. There's my lovely wife. My previous life, I used to be an accountant. I still technically maybe am. So if we talk about systems, these two guys, you can see they're skeptical, and they should be. Because you need to have your guard up. The first thing they're going to have to interact with, if they want to interact with the financial system, is a bank. And so banks, we have information networks, and over time we've improved those, right? We started with, pigeons and then messengers and horses. We ended up with the internet, so the information network we have now is very efficient compared to 30 years ago. If you think about the financial network, people traded shells and gold and all types of things. And so now we have digital information transfer where we still need gatekeepers, trusted parties to keep the ledger, keep score of who owes what. If I do a transaction, 10 Rand goes from me to you, we need to make sure it's not duplicated and the ledger adds up, right? And so we need banks, or at least 20 years ago we did need banks. We'll get to that. But these gatekeepers are for-profit entities, and they're inferred a lot of power because they keep this system, right? And so they have monthly, weekly, quarterly meetings where they need to report on the profit they're making, and they need to squeeze out profit. So it's very hard for them not to become exploitative, especially, it's a generalization, but especially if the product they're offering is, in essence, pretty simple. They're keeping a ledger, right? So a way more entertaining way of seeing what the problem is just to watch the movie The Big Short. Beautiful people, talented, they tell the story in 2.5 hours or something. Go and watch that, and then I'll move on to the next one. This graph just shows the growth of the financial industry in GDP percentages from the 50s until now versus, say, manufacturing. And so with something like this, I'm not going to make sweeping statements, but I would ask, what is the added benefit we've got for the increase in activity there? Okay. The next thing that we're going to have to look at is something insurance-y, medical aid, short-term insurance. And so insurance, in essence, is a group of people banding together to cover unexpected expenses, right? We moved to an island in Zanzibar, we're 1,000 people, we contribute together, and we cover unexpected expenses. Maybe we give our money to Jimmy, because he has a vault on the island. And after a year, we've all contributed. We've paid some expenses for unexpected events. And after a year, there's money left. And Jimmy comes to us and he says, he thinks it's his now. You're going to say, get stuffed, Jimmy. It's our money in the pool. We'll pay you for the administration, but essentially it's our money, right? We have a claim to that. And so the insurance system of today keeps that money. That's the point I'll make. You pay a premium, maybe you get something like an no-claim bonus, which is always kind of not maybe what it should be. But anyway, insurance is a great business for this reason. If you're an investor, you know this. And so maybe we can look at alternatives that brings it down to the community level. Right. In the case of medical aid, you're adding a third party. So instead of me paying, it's my medical aid paying. And once you add a third party, you're messing around with the incentives. You're messing around with supply and demand. You know, if I go there, is the doctor really interested in serving me, or is he interested in doing a procedure so he can claim it from the medical aid? Again, massive sweeping statement, but you know, somewhere in there, I know you've had experience that, you know, the incentive structures do bend a little, and this just shows just the growth in administration, which also happens if you add a third party versus number of physicians. And then I'm going to pick on investments. So they'll have to maybe save for one day. And so investments work on fees, and that's how they have, they don't invoice you always in rand amounts, they take a percentage fee. Right? And what I think could be a problem with that is if you see here, it says after inflation value of 100,000 rand invested for 40 years at 6.5%, those numbers don't matter as much. The relationship stays the same. If you had a 0% fee, that 100,000 rand would be 1.2 million. And if you have a 3% fee, you'd end up with 0.37. Right. I had an example where I sat with my mother. She was 65. She had something maturing. We went to the company. We sat in front of the financial advisor. First problem is the financial advisor works for the company, so not independent, right? And then it took me 3/4 of an hour of really heated discussion to get to, you know, what are all the fees? Just add them up for me. I just want to know. What is your fee? Oh, there's a platform fee. There's administration fee. There's investment management fees. Okay, let's just add them up. It came to more than 4%. Okay, so the problem with this is, you know, you can charge any amount for a service. I don't have a problem with that, but people should understand what they're paying. You know, so if you have a 5 million rand investment, you're paying a 3% fee. You're paying 12,500 rand a month in investment fees, right? And if you go to the average retiree and you ask them their 3 biggest expenses, I doubt whether they list investment fees. But if you look at that example, it's probably more than their rent. Okay. Okay. So, oops. I mentioned financial advice. Financial advice should be independent, trustworthy, right? It's like a doctor. And at the moment, it's mostly more directed towards sales. Okay, but we'll get to that. So this is the picture that we have. So let's talk about what's the direction we want to move in. So this scheme, I know it's very small. It comes from comes from Praxis Labs. These are a bunch of Jesus followers in New York. Think about these things. I love them. I did a course with them at the nonprofit I was at. They bring out playbooks for nonprofits, investors, vocation, and entrepreneurs. And their whole thing is to be a redemptive force in whatever you're doing. So some of the examples I've mentioned, and maybe, again, sweeping statement, but oftentimes business can be exploitative. So it's an I win, you lose relationship. But then some business strive for ethical, which will be win-win. Redemptive is I lose, you win. And so it aims, instead of leveraging culture, it aims to renew culture. And so I'd say as a base, that's one of the things we want to aim for. It's a high bar, but we want to aim for that. I want to lift out this example. This is a park there by Tacoma. I don't know the guy who built this, but it's a private individual. And he could have spent his money, I don't know what this park like this costs, but it's a very nice one. He could have bought a boat, I don't know, overseas vacation. He could have done many things, but he decided to build a park, right? And he's maintaining it at his own cost, and I'm sure you people are breaking stuff and messing it up. And so this is a redemptive act, right? He's losing, other people are winning. And the other concept I want to bring here is the concept of a public good, right? It's being maintained for the use of the public at minimal or no cost. And someone is doing that. It's what roads and railways should be, okay? So if everyone needs it, then we want it to be a public good, or as many public goods as we can, right? Everyone needs it. Let's bring it to them at minimal cost with the least amount of middlemen and profit-taking in between. Finally, pirate ships. Here we are. Okay, I'm going to deliver on that one. These screenshots come from a video that I'll share afterwards by CGP Grey, he's a YouTuber. But he explains how the remuneration model for pirate ships worked. So that on the left is the ship of the Empire. You can see the captain gets paid a lot because the Queen wants loyalty. When he comes back victorious, maybe he'll get some land, he'll become a duke, something. And the guy at the bottom is paid minimum wage and should do what he's told, or he'll end up in jail, something like that. On the right, we have a pirate ship. What they're doing may not be that noble, but they come together, at least according to the video, but I'm going to use the example, as equals, right? They have a contract, they choose a captain. He gets paid more because he has a different role, but they can change the captain if they want to, except in battle. You don't change captains in battle. But after the battle, they can change the captain. Then you have quartermaster, carpenter, surgeon. So I'm using this example just, we have, in South Africa, we have a capitalist kind of group, and mostly, I would say, and a kind of communist-leaning group. Both of those roll up ownership to the top, right? One rolls it up to the government, one rolls it up to shareholders. And as soon as you do that, the guys at the top need to make decisions for everyone, and they also have a lot of power, which people, they're saying power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. They're not bad people. If, it just happens that way. If you give people a chance to enrich themselves, it's often unhelpful. Okay. And so we need to think about ways of pushing ownership down. It's also a more dynamic way to run an economy, right? If you think about communist countries, the guy at the top needs to decide what car everyone should drive. It's not dynamic at all. This type of idea and the everyman being an entrepreneur is one of the concepts that America has done really well on. Okay. The poster child for cooperatives, like that one. So a cooperative is a legal form where the people who work in the business are the owners. There's no outside owners, right? And so there's a cooperative in Spain called Mondragon. They have 95 autonomous co-ops. Executive salary is capped at 6 times the lowest paid, right? And those multiples run into the hundreds for many of our companies and American companies. Collective revenue, 11 billion euro. They do big business. And they have a cooperative bank and a university. And it's all based in the same Basque region. And the quote there is also a screenshot. This lady works on the assembly plant for refrigerators. She says, the company, all of the workers are part owners. We make the money, it's ours. Right? And that understanding is key, right? If you want to do this. She understands that she's an owner. The video is about recession and how they had to make tough choices, work less hours. But with that understanding, they could do that. They could also move people around with companies, that type of thing, because they are the owners, right? In South Africa, unfortunately, we've lost the cooperative culture we had. We lost a lot of that. We don't have that mindset. It's much more common in Europe and America. In Europe, you'd go to a town, you'd go to the bank of the town, where all the town residents are members, and you'd get a loan, a home loan there. Right? In America, even utilities work like that. It's common. It's not a new thing. We don't have that culture really. We have very few examples of well functioning. We have the legislation for it, but we don't have good examples, unfortunately. And one of the hardest things I think to overcome in that sense will be to change a culture of people who can steward something together. All right, and you guys know what I'm talking about. I want to mention this example. It's just on the topic of ownership. Carl Zeiss, he's famous for lenses. He came up with a microscope. He got very rich. He asked himself, legally this is mine, but was this really my doing? I made a microscope. I stood on the back of many people doing lots of research, and my employees helped me and all this type of thing. So he did something quite cool, which is stewardship ownership, which transfers the decision-making shares to stewards in the business to make the decisions. It also helps so that the shareholders are not absent. And so Zeiss, and I think Rolex as well, works on the principle that the profits go reinvested into the business or it goes to the community. But the shareholding doesn't belong to anyone else. So and there are many people that have researched this well, and it's just something to kind of a redemptive idea to think about. Okay, so what does the alternative future look like? Here are the boys. They're happy, buddy surfing a wave because instead of banks, they're using Bitcoin. Yes. So Bitcoin is a technological advancement. It acts as a public good. It's run by math and cryptography. No middlemen. It's available to everyone. If you are middle upper class in the financial system, this doesn't mean that much to you. If you're a migrant worker sending cash home in a bus, that means a lot to you, right? You don't have the ID or whatever you need, and maybe your country inflates the currency. So it matters. It's everything a value transfer network should be, and it's probably going to be as big or bigger than the internet in terms of impact eventually, right? Not now. It's still in the 96 kind of internet phase. And so for this reason, you want people to adopt and start using it, right? Because it's such a better system of transferring value. People in Mossel Bay have done this. They have a project. They pay surf coaches in Bitcoin. Someone made a video a couple of weeks ago. You can click on their website and pay Bitcoin instantly. And they raised 800,000 Rand in 2 days for the project. Amongst others, the founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, gave Bitcoin and commented on it. And so it has those advantages, and it's one of the things, the first things we're trying to do is to create that circular economy. There's also a lot of benefit that accrues to a town if you are on the frontier, benefits like this, if you are on the frontier of adopting a technology like this. The next thing, and we get to the grocery savings. Okay, we're not at the Bitcoin world yet. So in the meantime, one of the functioning cooperatives in South Africa is a financial services cooperative. They have a credit card. They disintermediate many of the fees, the visa fees and other fees in purchases. And for that reason, you pay for the administration, and they take the rest of the money and they divide it up amongst the owners, right? And that'll be the card holders. And so our family has been using this for more than 20 years. And last year I worked out the benefit is you get about 3% back, which is a lot. Other programs, I worked out a very exclusive program a couple of years ago, and it was 0.6. If any loyalty scheme, you can work out what the percentages you get back in terms of rands. They're also, you can check them out on that website. There's also CoOp and Samba, which I believe is the same thing. But it's an example of a cooperative, and these guys don't have meetings every month discussing how they're going to increase their profits, because who are they going to take it from? The shareholders, right? So that's why it's 3%. Otherwise, it would have been 1% long ago. They would have had 2 meetings. Someone would have suggested, give them a half, give them a latte or loyalty card or something. Let's take the money, right? Another example that I love is in the US is Crowd Health. So they crowdfunding medical expenses, right? You pay Crowd Health as a platform, and you pay them $50 a month. That's what they get, right? And then they have 5,000 members at the moment. So if someone has a medical expense, they ask the crowd to fund it, and so you pay in a small amount and fund this guy. So it is. I love it because it's creative and innovative, and it keeps it at a low level, if you know what I mean. So as little middlemen involved as possible. I won't have time to explain more, but you can look at their website there. Then, of course, we want independent, trustworthy financial advice. In the industry, they are going towards fee-based advice, which you pay up front for. But this is also a culture thing. People aren't that keen on it because they'd rather take a percentage because they don't know what it means. They don't want to pay up front. It's a bit of a battle, but there's definitely something worth fighting for. And of course, they're working for a pirate ship. Now, with a pirate ship, I mean maybe they're part of a building concern where there's 10 people building houses and all of them are owners, right? They pay someone more, he's kind of the captain, but instead of just being a minimum wage worker, maybe, and this is the hardest thing, but maybe, all 10 guys are co-owners and it's a cooperative, right? Maybe a chocoboat that runs that way. Just think of the impact something like that could have. And then maybe Jeffreys Bay, they funded the boat with Jeffreys Bay's Cooperative Bank. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll have one. And so that is the alternative picture. So today we're launching the Not So Secret Club, which is JBay Finance Club. Yes. So we're interested in redemptive community finance. In a very short time, I tried to give a direction in what we're aiming. We like to think about these things. We like to try these things. If it's reachable, most of these things are difficult. But if we can copy something like crowd health, or we can lean into something like Bitcoin, we want to do that. We want to grow systems that bring good outcomes because of the way that they're designed, right? So I'm going to invite you to join the club. Go to jbayfinclub.co.za. It is a skeleton site at the moment, but there'll be blogs and information and resources. We'll collect it there. If you have ideas, let's talk about it. This is a long-term thing. Let's see if we can kind of progress for the better. And because you've been a good crowd and you're at the launch, you definitely deserve a cookie. So you can get a First Light winter cookie from Greg. He's going to have it there.
I'm the company secretary.
Sure. Greg's the secretary. Nice. There'll be two gentlemen over here, Dion and Reiner. So if you download one of these two apps, it's Bitcoin. It gives you access to the Bitcoin network via something called Lightning. And they'll give you some Bitcoin, and you can buy a cookie there. And it should be enough to buy a coffee as well, which you can buy at First Light. They accept Bitcoin as well. So that you can do now after the Q&A. And that is it. Thank you very much for listening.
Cool. That's exciting. Danie?
Yeah.
Yes. Wasn't expecting such a launch. But anyway, okay. Let's get into questions. Q&A. Yeah.
That's true. It's very diverse. So it's like I mentioned, you want to lean into things that are the easiest to reach, right? And because we're looking long term, we're looking where there's momentum. What's the kind of thing that have the biggest impact? And that's why adopting Bitcoin, building a circular economy in Jeffreys Bay is one of the primary things. There's Mossel Bay, Witstrand, Swellendam all have communities, and they have support of the whole Bitcoin community overseas, like I mentioned, the founder of Twitter. And so that's like an easy win in a way. And it also, because it's such a foundational thing, it may have the biggest impact in the long term, although I know it's super abstract at the moment. And then something like crowd health, I wouldn't have thought, I thought the same thing about paying an administrator and keeping the pool, which is legally challenged in South Africa. I thought short-term insurance may be the easiest one to do. But crowd health, having done what they've done in similar legal environment and being successful up to this point, they've paid all claims, all qualifying claims for the last, they've been running for like 2 years. I'm getting in touch with them and seeing if we can copy what they do, like shamelessly copy what they do. So that seems like another maybe possibility to start something. I mean, there's a lot of you want to lean into things that you can either copy or lean into and not create yourself, because there's such big topics like you mentioned. So those are the first two. Yeah, so one of the things about having a club is if you want to do any of this, CoOp Bank, CoOp anything, you need people, right? Yeah. A cooperative bank, you need 200 people. If you want to do insurance, you need 1,000 people to to start, right? To get that cold start thing going. The way they've done it, gets to how they do it, is if there's a claim, it goes to many people, but they agree to pay this guy. Okay, so it falls out of the definition of insurance. It is crowdsourcing, but it is opt-in. Right, so I'm just doing a payment to this guy for his medical expense. It's being administered by someone, but you kind of fall outside of a lot of the regulation just because it operates.
So I could, the amount I pay or a gift would be based on what I want, or is there a set cost that everyone would have to then contribute?
So there's a set cost, there's a set maximum. This gets into detail a little bit, but you get a generosity score, right? And this is one of the balancing mechanisms that you have to have, right? So if you aren't generous, if you don't pay, if that generosity score falls below 80%, they're not going to pay you. They're not penalized for not funding your event, right? So you are incentivized to contribute, right? Which you should be, because otherwise it doesn't work. So that's actually a key piece. I just ran out of time, but thanks for asking. Yeah, so especially in America, a lot of the health costs are inflated because of more complexity they have over there. So they do a great job of having a care advocate. So you contact someone, they get quotes, they get good suppliers, they negotiate fees, and because they pay cash, they get those discounts. So it is administered for you by someone. And that also goes into the system, and they work out what requests they send. You'll see on their social media, some of the requests they sent, and you'll get a feel for how it functions. But I still don't know nearly enough to kind of attempt it, but we're moving in that direction. So you sign up to the club and you include it in the communication. It's supposed to be, you may register it as a non-profit, so like an umbrella. The J-Bay Financial Club wants to see these things happen.
In J-Bay initially, it makes sense.
In J-Bay initially, but it's for South Africa, really. Especially something like the healthcare thing, it has to be for broader than J-Bay, right? So the circular economy thing is it's hard not to make that a non-profit. There's no revenue model for it. But if you look at something like the Crowd Health Scheme, you get paid for administration, and it's a business. So we want to set up that business. I mentioned Carl Zeiss and Rolex. We'd love to make it a stewardship ownership business, right? So that the funds go into the community or into the business itself. So it may, depending on what it is, whether it should be a CoOp or whatever, we'll see. But the J-Bay Fin Club is promoting kind of these types of ideas and hopefully initiating some projects in that direction. No, you've got it. So we're trying to look for alternatives, question systems that we have. Very often disintermediate systems, push ownership down, bring it back to a local level, to use technology to get it back to nuts and bolts. What do we really need? What is this thing? Rethink it. Bitcoin is that financial system that is fair and independent and is at the foundation of it. So it could be a local, you could do tokens in Bitcoin. It's local, but because it's international and instant as well, you connect it to this international community that will definitely have downstream benefits. Whereas One Village tokens can be limited. If you convert that into Bitcoin, if you get merchants online, you can spend Bitcoin at Pick and Pay right now, any Pick and Pay in the country, directly. And so there are guys working on ShopRite and all the rest to get them to accept Bitcoin as well. So that creates, like you say, better alternatives. So on your first question about ownership, I've thought about this quite a bit. The one thing is there's an app for circular economy. It's called Blink. That's that one. The other name is Bitcoin Beach Wallet, because that's the first example that worked in El Salvador. You can swap it into US dollars, your Bitcoin, so you can choose how much exposure you have at any time. You can swap it back and use it. So that's one kind of solution for today. The other thing is just about ownership and risk, right? At what point we talk about stewardship and ownership, who are we shielding if we say these people can handle risk and can understand it and invest in financial products, but these people can't? At what point do they become owners? Isn't it better that we give them a little bit of money? They see fluctuates in value. They know they have to steward it, take care of it. It grows. They have all the characteristics that company shares have. And it just builds that bridge so that when we want to include them, that's one of the things. We have big stokvels, but they pay out at the end of the year, and people spend their money. They don't want to. They don't typically, I think, invest in shares, to build wealth over generations. And so if you want to bootstrap that, isn't that a place to start? Because what you're saying is you want to keep that risk from that person, but they're getting paid rands weekly, and someone else, decides not to pay them rands anymore. Risk is part of life. That's what I would say to that. On the second question, I see Reino is itching to answer it. He knows way more about Bitcoin than I do. But this may be one that I'll include in the references or in a blog. But it's not easy to take control of Bitcoin, and there are many technical reasons. It's almost impossible. That's why it's been independent up to now, and will probably continue to be.
But at the simplest form, there's a limited amount of Bitcoin.
Yes.
And if the majority of that is held by a group,
yes,
they essentially can sway the currency's value.
To do that at this point.
Yeah, at this point.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I will send you some links, and I'll put it on the website, because there's.
Way limited.
That's a very valid question. There are people that are way more knowledgeable that can answer that, which I'll send you the link for.
Last, and then we're really going to cut.
So my understanding is our current financial system is loose. That's it. If you think of it historically, it's for people to lose. That's our current system. In my understanding, and you can see it. So
yeah, I mean, I didn't touch on inflation. America's printing money. They've been downgraded this week.
You know immediately your value of what you have in the bank now versus last year.
Yeah.
It's an obvious. And the point is you have no control over it.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm going to say cookies are hot before 2.
Yeah. That's it.
Okay, wait. So before we all go and eat cookies with Bitcoin, a few things to do. Sign up, go to JDay Fin Club, and you can register there if you're interested. Not
yes.
JDay Fin Design. We've also done.
No, I realized that we'll put a link to them and get them to accept Bitcoin.
Okay, and then this cookie system, you need to download the app.
Yes, one of these apps. Yeah.
One of these apps.
And then Reino and Dion are going to stand there, and they're going to zap you some Bitcoin. Okay. And Greg's going to be over there, and you're going to pay with it for a cookie. Okay.
I'm excited.
Let's do it.